Hello there, friends. It's Jimmy Maverick. Welcome to another edition of the Fantasy Maverick podcast. And today we're going to talk about players that got one-year contract extensions. I call it a prove-it deal. Are they viable for fantasy football? We'll talk about the names and which ones I think are best for fantasy this year.
Listen up. It's time for the Fantasy Maverick podcast, starring the guy who's going to help you win that fantasy championship, Jimmy Maverick.
Hello there, friends. It's Jimmy Maverick. Welcome to another edition of the Fantasy Maverick podcast. And hey, before I forget, I'd like to remind you to please like, share, and subscribe to this podcast. I really do appreciate it. It really helps me out, and I love to hear comments as well. So be sure to leave those. But today, we're going to talk about players with prove-it deal contracts. Now, what's a prove-it deal? Well, essentially what that is it's a one-year contract because either the player is just trying to prove that they are more valuable than the market thinks they are, so they think they do one-year contract and then they can get a larger extension after the season is done, or the organization doesn't have a lot of faith in that player, and so they're like, okay, I need you to prove that you're worth a longer-term extension. So it could be from either side, but regardless, there are a ton of players this year on these one-year prove-it deals, and pretty big names. I'm just going to give you a few. We've got Tevin Coleman, Sammy Watkins, Mark Ingram, Philip Lindsay, Marlon Mack, T.Y. Hilton, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Andy Dalton, Damian Williams, Jameis Winston, Leonard Fournette, Rob Gronkowski, A.J. Green, Deshaun Jackson, Gerald Everett, James Conner. There's a ton here. And so what I'm going to talk about is, are these players viable as far as fantasy football goes, and are they worth the pick? And there's 4 of them on a prove-it deal in the top 100. That would be Will Fuller at number 68, JuJu SmithSchuster at number 71, Leonard Fournette at number 76, and James Conner at 89. Are any of these guys fantasy viable on this prove-it deal, and would you want to take them? And are there any other players in this list who I like that are on this prove-it deal? So let's just start right out. So we'll start with Will Fuller, and I've already talked about Will Fuller. If you haven't done so already, go watch my regression candidate podcast, which I filmed a couple of months ago. Still relevant. Those players are all marked in my app, by the way. My Perfect Fantasy Draft, my drafting tool app. I'm working on the 2021 update right now, so new things are going in every single day, and you will see all the players that I have marked with a regression tag. You'll see a little red icon next to their name with a little downward pointing arrow. You can't miss it. Will Fuller is one of those. And believe it or not, even though that guy only played half a season and then he was suspended for PEDs, he still had the best season of his career in the NFL in 8 games. So I can see why the Miami Dolphins, where he is now a player, have decided to only give him a 1-year contract. They really want to see if this guy can make it through a full season, which he notoriously has not been able to do. In my opinion, Will Fuller is one of those players that I call a daily fantasy player. He's not the kind of player you want on your season-long fantasy team, but for daily fantasy, he's great. So as far as I'm concerned, Will Fuller, I would not take a chance on this year. I would skip. When you're talking at pick number 68, man, that's like the 6th round. You need to get better quality players than him on your fantasy team. We're talking that's the guy that could potentially be your flex or maybe your tight end. So anyway, I would not bother with Will Fuller. Next up, right after him at almost the same time is JuJu SmithSchuster, who of course went through his contract. It expired, couldn't find anything on the open market, so he re-signed with the Steelers for on a 1-year deal, and it's worth about $10 million. And frankly, I'm not thrilled with JuJu either. First of all, very crowded receiving corps. You got Deontay Johnson, you got Michael Pittman, you also have James Washington still there. So you're talking he's one of 3 or one of 4. Obviously, last year was a contract year. He did not do good on his contract year. That's always a strike against him, in my opinion. And so I'm just not thrilled with taking him in the 6th round of a draft. It's just too risky. Plus, you still have Ben Roethlisberger as the quarterback, who, although he is a great quarterback, I think he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. Let's face it, the dude is old. His other classmates from that class that he was drafted in, Eli Manning and Phillip Rivers, both have retired. So anyway, the sun is setting on Ben Roethlisberger's career. They don't have a great backup quarterback yet in that team, someone poised to take over. So this is a problem, and for all of these reasons, really, I just cannot recommend JuJu SmithSchuster for fantasy football. So the next fantasy player on a one-year deal is Leonard Fournette, who re-signed with the Tampa Bay Bucks, of course, after winning the Super Bowl last year. They're like saying, hey, man, let's keep the band together. Let's do it again. And so I'm sure he's foregoing some compensation here to do that. But this backfield, which was crowded last year, is even more crowded this year because they brought in Giovanni Bernard. So now there's basically 4 players in that backfield because, along with him, you got Ronald Jones, and then you have the rookie from last year, and I'm drawing a total blank on his name. I apologize for that. There's 4 guys in this backfield. And to me, that just generally signals a non-viable fantasy play. I'm sure he will have games where he will be a great fantasy player. And so again, Leonard Fournette kind of gets taken out to daily fantasy. He's a daily fantasy player, not a season-long fantasy player. So I would stay away from him as well. And finally, we've got James Conner at pick number 89. Going to the Arizona Cardinals. Now, this one actually kind of intrigues me. I'm not convinced Chase Edmonds is going to be the man in that backfield. I think it's going to be a shared thing, but it's only a 2-person RBBC, which is fine, better than a 3 or 4-person RBBC. At his draft position, not bad, 89. You're talking that's the 8th or 9th round, so you're in the middle rounds there. You can pick up a running back that can maybe get you 150 to 200 touches over the course of the year. That's pretty good. That's probably close to flex value. So I kind of like that, and because of that, the mid-round running backs are really important, and if you can get a guy that can be an every-week starter, man, that is huge. And so he is, I believe, still dealing with some injuries from last season. Obviously, that really limited his effectiveness. Also on a contract year last year, so that wasn't good. It's of all the 4, he obviously has the lowest risk, and I think probably the most viability to actually put together a fantasy viable season. So I do like him. Now, there's a bunch of other players on here. There's a couple in the mid rounds, but most of these guys are late round guys. Some after pick 160, so we're talking last round pick, or maybe a guy will still be on the waiver wire after the season is done. Are there any players that I particularly like out of the group? And well, there is one that I think of as a very viable QB1 potential, and that's Ryan Fitzpatrick, who now moves his services to Washington. Man, has that dude played on every team in the NFL yet? He seems to be almost there. But let's think about it. Last year was kind of a bad year for Fitz, and the big reason is because they wanted to bring in the new rookie quarterback. They wanted to get him started, and so Fitz got benched, and so wasn't able to play a full season. So the big question here is will Washington draft another quarterback? And in order to draft one that I think would be a threat to Fitz, they'd have to go first round, which means they'd have to trade up. So we'll have to see what happens with the draft. But if they don't, Fitzpatrick is in a real good situation with a really good, pretty good offense around him. I mean, you got Antonio Gibson and J.D. McKissick in the backfield. You've got Logan Thomas as the tight end. You've got why am I drawing a blank on the Terry McLaurin, Scary Terry, right, as one wide receiver, and they brought in Curtis Samuel, who has worked with Coach Reich before in Carolina. So you've got a really decent core of offensive productive units for him to play with. he's going at pick number 250. So this is a guy that's not going to get drafted in most drafts unless you have a really deep league. But shoot, man, talk about someone who has the potential to be a QB1. I think Ryan Fitzpatrick is definitely it. I really like him. Unlike the other guy in the 1-year deal, Andy Dalton over in Chicago, no way, no day. That's not a QB viable play. But Fitz is great. I do like Fitz. And you also have Jameis Winston sitting out there, and Jameis Winston with a great offensive coach and a very good team. The Saints, obviously, perennial playoff team. If they make him the starter, yes, he would be fantasy viable. But the fact is, the way they're paying him like a backup. I think they're going with Taysom Hill this year to be their starter. And they would maybe turn to Winston if he struggles. But, Taysom did really good in relief of Drew Brees last year. It'll be a different kind of offense. But Jameis Winston's only he got a 1-year extension, but only for like $5 million. That's not a starter. Okay, that is not a starter pay. So I think they've got him priced as a backup. I think that's where he's going to sit. Rob Gronkowski, I think that guy, low-end TE1, who obviously playing with Brady, those guys, I don't know how Brady can last this long, but he has, and he can, and he does, and he wins. But Gronkowski, sure, I'd take a chance on Gronkowski. Especially going where he's going at pick 129 right now. I think he probably is going to move into the top 100 by the time we get to drafting season. But I would definitely take a chance on Gronkowski as a late round TE1 pick. But really, most of these other guys, not super thrilled with. You've got Phillip Lindsay, Marlon Mack, and T.Y. Hilton right in the middle between around pick 115 to 130. Phillip Lindsay's now in a 3-headed backfield. He's got David Johnson and he's got Ingram. He's got Ingram who's coming in this year. So there's 3 of them. He's the only young guy, which is probably the only thing going for him there. I would not take him at this point. Only if he would fall maybe to the 150s would I take him. Marlon Mack, clearly being paid backup money, $2 million a year deal, is going to be Jonathan Taylor's show in that backfield. And plus, you also still have Nyheim Hines there, so you got a potential 3-headed beast. But it's going to be Jonathan Taylor. It's going to be the main, get the most of the work. And then T.Y. Hilton, man, fading wide receivers after age 30. When I'm drafting in for fantasy football, I want upside players. And these aging wide receivers, you got T.Y. Hilton, you got Deshaun Jackson, you got A.J. Green. These guys, man, Sammy Watkins, there's no upside. There's only their ceiling every year gets lower and lower and lower. And frankly, I'd rather try my hand with another receiver on that team, even though it is, new quarterback and all that. But, again, those guys, there's no upside there. Even at their extremely bargain prices, I'm super not interested. One that might be a little interesting here is Gerald Everett, who went from the Rams. Now he's in Seattle. And Seattle's had a problem keeping a tight end healthy. Gerald Everett's been able to stay healthy while in the Rams. Last time the Seattle had a viable tight end, it was Jimmy Graham. Jimmy Graham ended up having a great season, 10 touchdowns. Could Gerald Everett be that guy, man? He's at pick 170. This is like a last-round pick in your typical 15-round drafts. I usually don't draft a second tight end, but if you're in a deep league, a deeper bench, yeah, definitely. Grab him as your TE2. There could be some good things here. And also, I got to say, man, Tyler Higbee's stock moved up significantly because of that move as well. I really, really like Tyler Higbee, who has nothing to do with the contract with these prove-it deals, but now he's the only tight end on that team. Coming in with a player, Matthew Stafford, who does really well with his tight ends, as he did with TJ Hawkinson. Now he's got Tyler Higbee as his primary tight end. Boy, I like that upside there. So that's just a little aside. But again, you got to be careful with these prove-it deal players. They usually just don't pan out. Last year Antonio Brown Yeah, he came in midseason and he did good, but what did he do? First of all, he hurt the production of the other two receivers on that team because you're now splitting it three ways instead of two, with Evans and not Ridley, but with the other two receivers. But in the end, if you look at his annualized stats, it was under 1,000 yards. And Antonio Brown might get another 1-year deal. He might stay at Tampa Bay. He might go somewhere else. But, again, his ceiling, over age 30, receivers, every year their ceiling gets lower and lower, and they ride on their names. I still see Julio Jones in like the top 40 this year. I got to say, man, I'm not interested. There's not upside there. His ceiling every year, it was like 1,700 yards 2 years ago, and it was like 1,200 yards last season. This year, maybe 1,000. Other players are going to come in. They're going to steal some of his thunder, and he just can't do what he used to do. Why? Because they're over age 30. So, anyway, that's my opinion on that. But so those are the prove it deal players, and the ones who I think are probably viable. And really, just a few names, man. I like Connor. I like Fitz. I like Gronk. And maybe Gerald Everett. Maybe Gerald Everett as a flyer. Those are like the only guys I would really recommend out of that group. But anyway, thank you very much for watching. Again, I'm trying to be better about doing more of these podcasts and putting them out on a regular basis. We got the draft happening this next week, so excited about that. I'm going to talk about where those players went, who's got the best, who's in the best position to succeed at fantasy. We'll have a podcast on that. And again, I'm continually updating my app right now, getting things in there. If you want to look at it, you can look at it. It's under construction, right? So not all the stuff is in there yet, but you'll see a lot of the icons next to a lot of the players as far as regression players or contract year players. That's all in there right now. You can go to my website, fantasyfootballmaverick.com, and check that out. If you want to renew your subscription, you can do that as well. But we got a lot of stuff going on here. I'm feeling really good about 2021 and drafting an excellent team, which is going to win you some fantasy championships. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it. Stay tuned, and we will talk to you soon. Have a good one, everybody.